Welcome to Blueprint of an Athlete, where science meets sports. I'm Dr. Robin West, a board-certified orthopedic and sports medicine surgeon, and your host as we explore the intersection of performance, recovery, injury prevention, and innovation. I'm really excited. Today I'm joined by Ted Rath, the Director of Sports Performance for the New Orleans Saints. Ted has spent nearly 2 decades in the NFL leading sports performance with the Rams and serving as VP of player performance with the Eagles before moving to New Orleans, where he's tasked with peaking performance and minimizing injury across the roster. He's known for blending data, communication, and culture to keep athletes on the field and thriving. He's also the author of a recently published book, Beyond Comfort, Mastering a Growth Mindset with Excellence Through Urgency. Ted, welcome to Blueprint of an Athlete.
Dr. West, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. It's great to see you.
I'm thrilled to have you. Let's start off basic stuff. What core principles have guided you on your performance model, working with the Rams, Eagles, Saints, and several others?
Love that question. This is something that Reggie Scott, who I'm sure you're familiar with, who's the medical director over with the LA Rams, he used to always say this, and it's something that I've believed in my core being forever since, I was an athlete years ago. And Reggie and I used to always say this, and it's something I've carried on because I believe in it: mind, body, and soul. We have to impact players on a daily basis, obviously, because at the end of the day, Doc, you know this, it's wins and losses, right? That's how we're graded. That's how we're measured. But at the same time, we're dealing with human beings. We're dealing with people. There's a mind behind the athlete. There's a soul. There's everything we're doing from a physiological perspective. I'm trying to create as much healthy, positive environments as I can to protect the player in the now so that they can perform and in our world make a lot of money, life-changing money for generations and generations, which is amazing and a great motivator. But outside of that, I want to make sure that they can enjoy that life, increase health span. So if I'm teaching orthopedically sound techniques, if we're making sure that we're correcting faulty movement patterns, I know deep down in my soul, I'm going to help that athlete play with their grandkids, maybe a couple years longer, and maybe have a higher quality of life beyond the game. And really, that comes down to caring for the person, caring for the people that we get to work with on a daily basis, because this job's a blessing. It's really, really fun. I haven't felt like I've went to work a day in my life, and I'm sure you're the same, because we get very, very fortunate to come to these jobs every single day. So that's something I don't take for granted.
That's a great answer. Ted, it's been a tough stretch with the Saints right this year with the injuries and kind of up and down record. But how do you approach maintaining performance standards, morale, and trust in this whole process when results on the field aren't necessarily reflecting kind of the work behind the scenes?
Yeah, this is a great point. So thank you for bringing it up, because this isn't just football. Football I love because every sport's a microcosm of life, right? You have ups, you have downs, you have adversity, you have moments of great triumph. And sports are no different, especially with the high stakes that you have within professional sports in the NFL particularly. So for me, it doesn't change the process. And I've always said this, it's all about the process. And that's really easy to say when you're 10-0, when you're competing for world championships and you're in the Super Bowl. It's really easy to say, trust the process. When you're in the midst of a struggling season, when you're dealing with losses, when you're dealing with injuries, whether you're dealing with adversity in a fourth down and you don't get the first, or the grand scheme of things and you lost 2 or 3 games in a row, that process has to be what follows you through. So if you're riding the waves of the wins and the losses and you're going up and down and your emotions are based on the results of the scoreboard at the end of the day, you're going to really struggle, because the short term, great. If you have success, celebrate it. Have fun in those moments and celebrate the wins with the people you work incredibly hard with. But at the same time, you have to focus back on ensuring that process is what's going to carry you on. And we're not just looking at this as a game by game process. We're here to build not just a culture, but we're building a foundation for years of outcomes. So when we attack the process and we make sure that that's shored up and we control the things that we can, the scoreboard will ultimately take care of itself in due time. But trusting that process and reminding yourself to do it in the midst of a losing streak is probably the most critical thing that we can all do.
Yeah, it's certainly tough. Obviously we've all been through those ups and downs, and it's tough to stay motivated and focused, especially, you've got rookies or you've got veterans who've seen it before and trying to keep everyone engaged. So you've helped lead these performance rooms, obviously, at so many teams, but what have you found travels well and what has to be rebuilt to fit a new team? Is there anything in
Yeah.
particular?
Number one, start with the person. So everything that I've found, I've been fortunate to be with 5 NFL teams, and what I've learned works everywhere is developing great relationships. When you develop great relationships, the buy-in is much easier. You're communicating on a much more elite level, and you're really establishing trust, right? So for us to establish trust, because we're ultimately asking players when they come in on a Monday after a really physical football game, and maybe we traveled cross country, your body is sore. You're dealing with this acute stress. You're dealing with all the things, and psychologically, what went on in the game? Did you have a good game, bad outcome, all those things. And then we're coming in and turning around and asking them to do more uncomfortable things like work out. We're asking them to come in and do tempo runs so that we can start that recovery process. So for me, it's building that trust first and foremost and giving away my trust to our players, because ultimately these guys are professionals and we're here to work for them. We don't have jobs with our players. So it's all about the players and putting them first, just like you would with a patient, doctor. It's the amazing thing is when you build that trust, you can have such great outcomes. And those are the teams that I finally look back on when we were in a hole. Maybe we started year one was a rebuild and we struggled. And then year two, we got better. And then year three, you're in the playoffs and you're competing for Super Bowls. Those are the times that I look back and fondly remember, because it started with trust and it started with the relationships, and then came the outcomes that we were all seeking, competing for world championships, but building that relationship first and foremost anywhere. We could talk of the science of it. I mean, everything has shifted so much from a sports science perspective, but what still works is showing the players, hey, you know what you're talking about. You're well educated, because for me, every flight that we would take the first 10 years of my career, I'm reading research and I'm trying to educate myself so that I can better serve these players. I think that travels well too, is making sure, number one, you're putting the players first, explaining the why, and always, always, always keeping that player-centered focus, because everything we do is for them and hopefully putting them in the best possible position to be successful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think so many players, question, right? Because are you in it for the team? Are you in it for me? And it's building that trust, it certainly takes some time and some effort. And I don't know if you have any tricks on it. How do you build that trust, especially when you're at a new team, and you're walking in and all of a sudden preseason starting, and how do you build that trust? Is it time? How do you show again that you're in it for them and not just for the entire team to win?
Another great point, Doc. Well, time is a factor, clearly, because it takes time. But the big word I would use here is vulnerability. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. And the greatest 4 words that any person in a leadership role can say is, I messed that up. So for me, if I did program an exercise, or if we had a bad workload on one day of practice, and maybe I didn't periodize really well going into a West Coast or a tough travel trip, for me, it's owning that and then saying, hey guys, I screwed that up. I'm sorry. Here's what I did wrong. Here's what I'm going to learn from this, and here's how I'm going to improve it. And then the most important part of that whole thing, Doc, is the action, right? Don't just tell me, show me. People see a lot better than they hear. So for me, it's putting that action into place, but also not running away. When you make a mistake, it's okay. We all make mistakes. Players, their mistakes are on national television on this big stage. Everyone can see it. Sometimes we could cover it up if you want, but I think the best leaders that I've been around sit in front of it. They own it. They take it, but then they take the steps necessary to actually improve and not make that same mistake again.
So true. That's such great advice. I mean, really being vulnerable and but willing to make that change and improve. How do you structure your days, that Monday through game time, whether it be Thursday night game, Sunday night game, to balance kind of readiness, adaption, and freshness, especially during the grind, right? As you get late in the season.
Yeah, you have to look at the NFL schedule is unique. If you go to the Super Bowl, you're almost going for 7 months consecutively. So you look at that, and a lot of the people, if you're not in the sport, in the business, you don't really understand. There's not a lot of days off. There's really no days off. You can get a couple days, you sneak them in the bye week. So a typical week, if it's a Sunday to Sunday competition, and we know that we're going to have a full calendar, 7 days to actually prepare, that Monday to me is one of the most important days that we can have, because physiologically, once again, the soreness, the acute stress that those athletes undertook through the game, you could have a game with 85 snaps on the offensive side of the ball. The defense could have 50. So there's a little bit of an adjustment and adaptability that you have to maintain through the course of those games, those weeks, and those seasons. But to structure that Monday, the first thing we're trying to do is take a quick wellness check. So for me, it's walking up. It could be a subjective wellness questionnaire on an iPad, or just verbally talking, hey, how do you feel? You had 68 snaps. Your high-speed yardage was out of control. Maybe you're a special teams player, so I know if you flagged getting into the nitty-gritty granular data, I'm going to go to those players. So I'm going to have my highlight list, and I'm going to go talk to those players. How do you feel? How are your hamstrings? Soft tissue-wise, what's going on? Joints, everything great. then we can make those subtle adjustments. But on a global scale, we want to move those athletes. So the first 30 minutes that we'll have them in on a Monday morning, first thing that they do is come into the weight room. We're going to get into soft tissue. We're going to do soft tissue preparation. We're going to do mobility work, and then we're going to do some form of activation. It could be mini band glute activation protocols in series. And then we're going to go into a dynamic movement session, and then we're going to hit tempo runs. Really, it's a reduced rate. We're not trying to sprint at maximum speed. Clearly, we just came off a game, but we're trying to inhibit all that soreness and get it out, get it flush, and allow those athletes to move through a full range of motion. And then we finally come into the weight room, and that's the day we're going to attack the lower body when we can. So athletes that are healthy enough, we're going to go through a squat pattern. Could be a front squat, back squat, could be a variation of a pull, a trap bar deadlift, something like that, because we want to stimulate growth, maintain strength, and develop power. And for that Monday, that gives us the most amount of time before first our main practice day, which would be Wednesday, and our next competition, which is next Sunday. So we can attack the lower body after we flush that acute soreness, build strength, develop that power, and then maintain that going through the week. Tuesday for most teams is a player day off. So within the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, we have to give them one day off. That's typically Tuesday. We'll still see the majority of our team, and they're coming in to go through recovery protocols. They're in the weight room. They're in the training room. They're seeking treatment. They're getting things like that, where we're doing everything based on recovery. Wednesday starts to ramp up our week. So Wednesday, I've always tried to marry this concept within the coaching staff of what do you need to install, and then I can build the workload and manage the workload off of that. So if we know it's first and second down, I can manipulate the volumes, the intensities, and everything we need within that practice to marry that concept, right? So the tactical marries into the physiological, and we're getting what we need both on the sports side for the coaches, but then also physiologically so we can ramp up the week and progress it. Thursday becomes a ramped up day without pads. So Wednesday we'll go full pads. So we're installing run game. We want to have contact, but we also want to protect some of the O-line, D-line just from AC joints, some of the things that they can get from a shoulder standpoint. And then Thursday we take those off so that our athletes can run a little bit faster, third down install. We try to get up into high speed running, and we try to really maintain, because once again, what's the other thing of trying to prevent some of the soft tissue injuries, making sure the tissue is adequately prepared to continue to sprint next Sunday. So we try to mimic that in our mid game, which we would call our Thursday. And then our Friday, we're going into the week, we're starting to taper down. So our Wednesday would have another training session. Our Friday has an optional training session, which would be an after practice type of lift. Our practice squad gets additional development on that day, as well as our Monday. And our Saturday, which we're filming right now on a Saturday, we just had our walkthrough. So now players will go home, you get some family time, which is awesome. And then we'll come back for night meetings, really to recap the week, make sure there's anything that we need to touch up on install or any corrections we need to make. And then Sunday, we show up to the stadium where we're traveling if it's a road game on that Saturday. And then hopefully we're coming home with a W.
It's a busy week. And I'm sure it's certainly tighter when it's a Thursday night game, right?
Yeah, Thursday games, Doc, are, obviously we talk about the physical stress because getting the players turned over from that physiological perspective, we would actually start in the locker room. So when we would have a Thursday game, we're utilizing protocols like BFR protocols from a recovery standpoint. We're putting them into Normatex. We're bringing in massage therapists, and then we're flushing them. We're getting them anti-inflammatory based shakes, smoothies, food, supplements, those things where we know we can expedite, because food, sleep, rest, recovery, those are the formulas to really maintain health for a football team, for general population, for anyone. But we're starting that process right after the game on that Sunday, going into a Thursday game, and then everything just gets expedited. You're really forcing everything that you would typically do in 7 days down to 3.5, 4 days. So everything gets expedited. We would still have a training session though, get them turned over on Monday. We wouldn't go full speed practice on a week where it's reduced from Sunday to Thursday. We would do walkthrough tempo. And then by the time we hit Thursday, the players are starting to adequately move over. And it's typically a night game if you're playing on a Thursday, unless it's Thanksgiving. So we get a little bit of an extra room for recovery on that Thursday morning as well.
Certainly a tight timeline. Then you get a little recovery the following week. A little longer. So tell me about your performance meeting. Are you meeting with your coaches every day, and who's in the room, and kind of what's on the dashboard, and what decisions are being made in that?
Yeah, I love that too, because communication, Doc, you know this, whether you're going into a surgery, whether you're with a sports team, whether you're in business and life, great communication leads to great collaboration. So that constant influx of communication, we meet daily, and that daily meeting is with our entire coaching staff, our medical staff. our sports performance staff, everyone associated with touching the players is in that meeting. And we're going over injury reports, updates on return to play protocols, updates on what the practice loading would be, if we're going to deload or if we're going to work workload management within some of our veteran players. All those things are discussed daily, and we're hitting it just so everyone has all the information readily available, and then we're hitting the ground running. If there's ever anything that pops up, we'll do breakout meetings, obviously. So within the medical and the performance model, we're meeting really in depth at least once a week, where we're going way granular. We're going into the data. We're talking about asymmetries, force plate projections. We're looking at Nordboard testing. We're looking at the on-field data, and we're going in a little bit more in depth that maybe, the position coaches don't necessarily need all that information, but within the performance and the medical team, the nutrition, everything that goes into that player, we're talking about and we're trying to impact, because our thing is optimization. We're trying to optimize each individual player, and that's the setting where we can really dive deep and go into it about what can we do to help this player, that 1% change. How can we get this player a little bit better? That's where those meetings occur, but it's constant, and you have to have high levels of communication to build, once again, that collaboration.
Yeah, and then as part of that medical team and the performance team, how do you align your return to play criteria when you have an injured player? And are there thresholds that you look at, objective thresholds? What are the practice progressions, game day roles? How do you work together as a team? That was always my favorite part of, being on a team, really working together and collaboratively. But what are the criteria that you use?
It's a fun puzzle to put together. I agree with you. It's one of the most exciting parts, because no two rehabs, no two return to play protocols are identical, right? Because once again, we're dealing with people. So the first thing that we do is, hopefully we've established baseline testing protocols. It's something, taking a job for the first year, that's something we've been working on since we got here in February. What are our baseline testing patterns? What's our athlete intake? How are we going to assess them? What movement assessments are we doing? Force plate testing protocols, all those things. So when an injury does occur, we can go back to that baseline. And then it's a step-by-step process. We're working with our physical therapists. We're working with the doctors. We're working with everyone based on whether it's a surgical intervention or not. And then we say, hey, here's week 1, here's week 2. And we build out this plan really just like you would anything, where we look at a full season schedule. We're manipulating that down to weekly, but then within that, what's every day? Every day has an identity. All right, today is going to be a strength-based workout, or today's running protocol, but we're going underwater, we're going on the pool, and then we'll progress into an Ultra G, then we'll be on land. All those things have to be systematically planned, progressed appropriately, but then once again, you have to maintain the ability to adapt. So that's where, once again, that conversation, daily communication has to be on point, because when we do have to make an adaptation, it's an easy conversation. The PT says, hey, we're going to switch this. Perfect. All right, on our side, we're going to do this. It might change a testing protocol or a testing timeline. Great. And then we're all on the same page. But that puzzle is the funnest part of it, because putting it together, and then this, Doc, when you see the outcome, when you get that player back on the field and you watch them have success, there's no greater feeling for everyone involved in that, from nutrition, sports science to medical. Everyone involved in that process has that smile. And you know what I'm talking about, Doc, because you see it and you're like, it's almost like your kid, right? When your child does something great and you just smile and you're like, they did it. You watch them and you see them have success. There's no better feeling in our profession.
It's so true, and that team communication is really key. I've found that throughout my career, right? Again, I can do a surgery on someone, but I'm not the expert on the recovery side or the nutrition side. So again, working as a team and everyone having their areas of expertise and working together. We're all in it together for the same reason. Are there 3 or 4 leading indicators that help you identify a risk for a soft tissue injury long term, or issues long term?
Yeah, one of the first things, the force plate, I've mentioned it a couple times. I think neuromuscular fatigue status is one of the best things that we can use from a measurement, because when your neuromuscular fatigue is going to increase, which it does every practice, every game, whether we're playing on artificial surface to grass, all those things play, weather games, cold weather, warm weather, all those things. When I look at the neuromuscular fatigue level, typically through like an MRSI or reactive strength index indicator or something like that on the force plate, that's going to give me really crucial information, because we're testing consistently and systematically. So as long as I have a firm baseline, but then we're repeating that test consistently, I can track over time and I can see trends. Hey, if you had a 15% drop in your neuromuscular fatigue status, that's an area for concern. I'm going to talk to that player. And for me, it's always about context. So I can look at RSI, I can look at this one metric, but that's typically going to lead me down to ask more questions. The next question might go to, okay, the RSI is down. This is a skill position player. They had a high workload on special teams. So that means a lot of high speed running. They're stressed from their subjective wellness questionnaire, so cortisol levels are probably high. I'm going to go to the Nord board next. So then I'm going to start to layer different levels of context within the information and say you dropped 17% of RSI, your Nord board flagged for asymmetry, and you're below our strength threshold. And hey, maybe your biomarker, if we're doing salivary testing or something like that, also indicated this. Then I'm going to go into that athlete and say, hey, what's going on? Well, I'm a little stressed at home. And then that context usually leads to deeper conversation. And then with that conversation in that context, I can make a better decision based on, hey, we're going to deload this player. Maybe it's a 25% deload at practice that week or a 50%, just based on those things that are occurring, so that hopefully we can get on the more prevention side so that those things trigger. But I would say one of the most important things, RSI is something that we track. You can do that from some velocity-based training tools too, like Gym Aware. So if you're doing a consistent lift, it could be a clean pull variation or something like that. As long as you're doing it consistently and you can follow those trends over time, I think that's one of the key indicators that I've found that starts that process of collecting more context when you do flag a player for a potential injury increase.
Are you able to explain the RSI a little bit to our audience just so they have a
Yes.
better understanding?
So RSI, reactive strength index, I always explain it like this. Think of this as an efficiency and output test all in one. So if you're unfamiliar with a force plate, what we'll do is a counter movement jump where we'll have an athlete stand on these dual, it's basically ground reaction force measurement tool. And we'll have asymmetries involved here because we can look at a left and a right side dominant force production through these ground reaction force plates. So as we jump, we'll do a counter movement jump, typically hands on hips to remove momentum. We look at this. What RSI is looking at is how efficiently are you loading eccentrically? So how fast can you actually load your body weight, decelerate, and then go through the amortization phase to go back up into the concentric to basically jump. So how fast, how efficiently can you load, go down, and then how fast can you redirect your force coming back out? And force plates are highly, highly sensitive pieces of technology. So you can imagine we collect over 90 metrics just from one jump, and we're jumping multiple times with each athlete every week. From that, we can look at baselines. So we can look at trends. If I know your efficiency is going down, your output could still be high. So if we looked at something like jump height, if you just took a vertical jump, which it also gives us, say this athlete jumped at 28 inches, but the output is still 28, maybe even 27 inches, just a slight reduction, but it took them 50 milliseconds slower to actually load. I know that your neuromuscular fatigue status has changed. You're still able to put the output. You can still run, you can still do, but I know that you're just a step slower. So for me, that's the key difference between being in position on the football field and being a little bit to the left. A difference of 6 inches on a football field could be the difference of taking on a contact ACL and not, just because your foot moves slightly. So those are the things that we're looking at, but RSI gives us that efficiency and output and helps us dive into things like neuromuscular fatigue.
And so you'll have a baseline on your players, and then you'll test them throughout the season. How often are you testing them, and how often are you tweaking those changes?
Weekly. So we'll do this weekly. For certain players, if we have maybe a higher concern and we say, hey, your RSI is down significantly, I might repeat that jump later in the week on a Thursday or a Wednesday, but every player at least once a week. And then some of the velocity-based training where we can get reactive strength index too, we're doing that at least once a week. So for me, I'm collecting multiple data points consistently that we already have established a baseline on, so I can revisit those at any time. And that gives us better confidence that the data is telling us the story that we need to once again dive in and find a little bit different layer of context with that player.
It helps on a long season, right? And I'm sure you see changes throughout the season, but trying to maintain it.
Absolutely. And the other cool part, we just do it. We're midpoint season. We're close to it right now as we're recording. We're looking at body composition checks. So we're rechecking, hey, what's going on? We can look at internal, external things like the force plate or their workload volume from on-field tracking. Internally, though, what's your lean body mass? We always look for a muscle swing. We've dropped body fat. We've increased lean body mass through the course of the season. That's a great outcome for those players because we know we're increasing body armor. We're increasing the capability, the strength capability, power capability, so that they can really play their position at a more optimal level. So we're checking all those things. And you're exactly right, Doc. As we collect this data through the course of a season, it's really helpful to be able to go back and revisit and then see, hey, what was the impact of this maybe adjustment on practice this, or maybe this training stimulus. Maybe we changed loading, or I deloaded them in the weight room one week and we saw all these spikes in their RSI. So we know neuromuscular fatigue had a positive change. Those are key findings for us. So we're always looking at those numbers. We're always taking notes around that thing, really self-scouting to see what impact all these adjustments have on those players.
There's so much data that you can get, and there's so many options as far as these wearables, GPS tracking, the force plates you talked about, velocity profiling, vision, reaction tests, wellness data. I mean, you've got this litany of information. So how do you integrate it all into one coherent plan, and how do you sort of fine tune that?
That's a great question. The big part is collecting the data, but having a system that can house everything. So this is really cool that you asked this, because we've been doing this since I got here in February. We call this our AMS, our athlete management system. It's something that we've gotten. This has kind of become more the norm within the NFL. There's a lot of great companies out there that build AMS programs, and you can basically, hey, purchase this software. Here's all your information, and we're good to go. Great. I've found particularly when you have software designers in-house, when we have data analysts in-house, and I'm talking employed by the team, they can build amazing things, Doc, which I'm sure you've seen. So we have actually customized one within the New Orleans Saints organization. So as we're pulling in literally millions of rows of data on every player, we can custom design how we want that data presented. And then also what flagging systems we have working behind. It could be based on machine learning models or however else our data analysts find that we can actually flag these things. But it's getting ingested typically through APIs. So the technology from the force plate is pumping that information directly into our athlete management software. And then I can dive into the information that I actually need. And we can build these cool profiles around each individual player and the team. So we've collected all this information, literally millions of rows of data. But now we have a digestible way where I can see it, I can show it to a player, to a coach, to our general manager, and we can have it in a more digestible form where it's not just an Excel sheet where you're looking at really, really finite numbers. It's, okay, why is that red? Well, this is a flag. Here's why it's a flag. And we can simplify it in a lot of ways so you can digest it. So that's a great question, though. That's a really important aspect. You can collect all the data you want, but what's actionable and how are you able to digest it and then communicate it to the key stakeholders, the players, the coaches, general managers, front office, ownership, whoever it is. That's an important part of this.
Yeah, I think those graphics really help a lot in helping to show the athlete, why are they working so hard, and why are you making them do this test or this, strengthening program, right? To show them, like you said, the green, the yellow, the red. I think athletes really understand that buy-in is important.
Definitely. And athletes they're well educated. I love the question of why, what does this mean? And sitting down and being able to actually display it, show it, and walk them through it. Once again, you just said it, you get buy-in. And that buy-in is so important because once again, we're establishing that trust level so that they know, hey, we're here to optimize you. We're here to help you. Here's one of the ways that we can help you. And you can actually show them on a screen. It's really powerful.
What's the simplest setup for like a high school or a college program who doesn't have the funds to do all this stuff? What would you say would be the most effective way to track performance?
Yeah, a pen and a paper, subjective wellness questionnaire. If you have nothing, if you have a computer program that you can do it, great. If not, verbally asking players, what's your current stress level? What's your current physical soreness level? Or what's your physical well-being? You could use a Borg model. You could use a 1 to 10 scale. How do you feel mentally? How do you feel physically? And then tell me, do you have any sore spots on your body? What are some soreness levels? For us, we do this on an iPad that we created within our AMS, but you could do the same thing if you're a coach at the high school level, just taking notes. Athlete A, what is your soreness level out of a scale of 10? You're an 8? Wow. Okay, that practice yesterday must have been pretty significant. So I think we find a lot of benefit just from asking subjective questions and saying, what's your current level? How do you feel? How fresh are you? And then the other big one is sleep. How'd you sleep? How have you slept over the last couple nights? Because we know sleep is one of the best recovery tools there is available. So for us, it's going back to that and saying, all right, well, what's going on? Let's talk about your sleep hygiene. For us, then you can have an actionable change in saying, hey, you're on your phone until the last minute before all right, let's put on blue light blockers, or let's change the setting on your phone. Turn the TV off. Simple things like that, and you actually increase the ability of that athlete to sleep, therefore recover at a higher level. You're going to have a better outcome.
That's probably changed a lot over the past 20 years, man. I know for me, just seeing my athletes, but for you, it's incredible, the social media and how much time people spend on it. And they're like, I slept 4 hours because I was up till 3 in the morning looking at my phone.
Yeah.
Makes me crazy. So I'm sure that's kind of adjusted your training as well, what you recommend.
It's changed. And the cool part too, Doc, is we get to document some of their sleep. There's so many different, there's HRV, you look at Aura Ring, 8 sleep. There's different ways to track sleep now, Whoop bands. You can see all these really, really cool devices, and then you can actually quantify, hey, remember when you drank a couple beers last night, look at what it did to your sleep. Oh, you stayed up late, you were playing video games, look at what it did to your sleep. So having that actionable data and that objective data is really powerful because we can talk them through, hey, if you just shut the TV off an hour earlier or don't eat this right at bedtime, then you're going to have a better outcome. Then we can actually show them with the data. That's really powerful as well.
It is that the wearables are really really interesting, and seeing the college kids wearing, using these wearables, and then really seeing the effect of, like you said, sleep, drinking, partying, and here they are trying to perform at the highest level, but you can
Yes,
actually look at the data.
absolutely.
How do you, get buy-in from veterans who've really seen it all and they kind of know what works for them versus young players who are kinda drowning in all this information?
I love this question. And it's the same thing we do with the rookies, though. So there's not this huge difference in what our strategy is. It's explaining the why. Sometimes what I found, I always tell this story. I had Jason Kelsey for a number of years in Philadelphia, and it was awesome. It took me a full year to get Kelsey to buy into kind of workload optimization and have him deload his practice load. And I'm like, Kelsey, trust me, this is going to work. After I finally got it, he finally was like, "You were right." I was like, "That's one of the greatest days of my life. I got it. I got it." So convincing them, but once again, coming back to leverage the data, I think showing them the why. So, hey, here's your neuromuscular fatigue status and showing them the data and showing them their trends over time. And then when you actually have an outcome and say, remember, we deloaded you 25% last Wednesday. Look at what all your data said. It went up. Your strength went up. Your power went up. Your neuromuscular fatigue is better. You slept better. All these things. And then you can show them that quantifiable data. But it also comes back to trust, getting the veterans who have seen so much. I can learn from them as much as they can learn from me. That's the beauty. That's what I love about this sport is we can digest and say, hey, Kelsey, or here, Cam Jordan, what have you done that's made you so successful for 15 years? What's your routine like in the off season? Learning and then imparting some of the knowledge or some of the ways that we can by utilizing that data. But also it's that trust factor. It's getting to know them. But I love learning from those guys too, because we can learn so much. And I think just being a lifelong learner, I can learn more from players than they can learn from me. That's part of what I love about this.
A two-way street, right? You can educate and they can teach you too.
Absolutely.
What mistakes have, performance leaders made, when they first step into a new locker room, whether it be a new performance, somebody, a new coach, or whether they're coming into a new locker room, and how do you recommend avoiding these mistakes?
Yeah, and I've made them all. We've all made them all. So once again, learning from them. I think not being able to be adaptable. That's one thing that I definitely, especially younger in my career, knowing that there's different ways to do it exactly to the point you just asked. So what can I learn from a veteran who's had really, really high levels of success and how they've prepared their body over the course of their career? There's something there that I can learn. And then there's something there that I can probably apply to other players in the future that can help them as well sustain and have this sustainable success. So for me, it's making sure you're not so rigid to where you lose that opportunity where you can actually adapt a little bit. And it could be a simple exercise like, hey, this exercise makes me a little bit sore on this practice day. Well, let's adapt when we provide that stimulus, or let's adapt the exercise. Let's modify it. So being open, being willing, which once again takes vulnerability, and it's something we all have egos. It's that constant daily battle. I know best. So I think that's the biggest mistake a lot of people. It's allowing that ego to come in and tell you that you already know best. I'm learning something new every day, Doc. I'm sure you're the same way. That's to where, and we all have to battle that ego, but at the same time, I'm humble enough to know that there is so much left to learn. I'm going to continue to learn. So I would say it from a leadership role, definitely don't walk in and think you know everything, because you don't. And I don't. None of us do. So continue learning with a humble spirit. I think that'll get you really far in life.
It's the best way, I think. I think that learning constantly. Again, I learn from my residents, my medical students who come through, and try and take something from everyone. How do you adjust? We talked about like short weeks and everything, but how about cross country travel or extreme weather conditions, cold, heat, humidity? Is there anything that you do on the performance side on preparing for that game that you do on that side that changes?
Yeah, circadian rhythm's real. When you look at international travel, when you have teams going to London, I've done 4 international games at this point in my career. when you go to London, when you go to Germany, when you go to now they're going to Australia next season. You look at some of these bigger flights, circadian rhythm adjustment and adaptation is really, really crucial. Some of the things that you can use to mitigate some of that and expedite that process, red light therapy, blue light therapy, so you can actually stimulate certain things. For us, it's also the sleep side of it. So are you supplementing with things like melatonin? How are you increasing sleep? Tart cherry juice, some of the things that we can actually get, magnesium, some of the supplementation that we can do, and then the strategy of when you actually get there. So when you arrive, maybe it's a Europe trip, right when you arrive, a lot of teams will actually fly overnight. So we're trying to get sleep on the plane, which isn't an ideal scenario. But in the NFL, we live in realistic versus ideal. We live in the realistic world. Try to adequately get as much sleep as we can through the duration. But when we land, when we're feet on the ground, we take them directly to a dynamic movement phase. So I'll take their shoes off, grounding effects, everything, get them on the grass. We'll have espresso shots for them there so we can get them caffeinated a little bit. Because what you don't want, if you allow the players just to check in the hotel, go into their room, and I've physically seen this, guys fall asleep. Now we lost them, but now they missed 2 meetings. Somebody go wake them up. So getting them moving and getting them active, that realistic side of it. So the cross-country flights are real, and there's so many strategies that you can implement from that. The weather games, that's another great point, Doc, because cold weather, there's one season of my career, we started in Tampa, and I think it was 104 degrees. Our last game was in Green Bay. It was like 5 degrees. So you have these huge swings where we traveled to all these different places around the NFL, mitigating the stress once again, sleep and nutrition, adequate. You have to make sure you're starting there, especially for some of those hotter weather games. Being here in New Orleans, humidity is something real. Checking and making sure we're managing the wet bulb globe temperature. We're not mitigating all those stresses, or we're mitigating them, getting them inside, those things. So for that's hydration, that's nutrition. What are you putting into your body to make sure that we're ahead of this? So for us to prevent any cramping and things like that. The cold weather, similar. What I've found too, Doc, you've seen this, a lot of players will actually cramp sometimes in those cooler weather games because they're not thinking about drinking. You're not thirsty. You're not sweating. So your body's at a point where you're just thinking about staying warm. So for us, we have some of those strategies when we're on the sideline. Obviously, there's certain weather. Our equipment managers around the NFL are amazing, making sure they have the right gear that can maintain warmth, the right gloves, all those things. But then the sideline, we have heated benches. We have cooling benches. We have all these things that we can throw into from really modalities from equipment that help us mitigate some of those risks. But every game is very different, especially when you're talking about some of those big heat swings, those humid games, all the way down to some of those colder weather games.
Great. Yeah, the weather changes, right? I mean, it's an outdoor sport. And so unlike baseball, we play in the rain a lot. We play in some humidity. But with football, we're playing in really, really cold weather and
Yes.
extremely hot, right? Like you said, throughout the season, it's changing, fluctuating a ton.
Yes, definitely.
I want to go back to your book. In the introduction, I mentioned your book, and I think it just got released this year, so it's pretty new. And I'd love to hear a little about it, and also, what prompted you to write the book, and how does it connect to your own journey in professional sports and performance coaching?
I think you said it earlier, Doc, is curiosity. Curiosity is something that I think is really, really critical for all of us, especially if you want to continue to grow, and we all want to continue to improve, not just in our work lives, but our home lives. As a father, as a husband, as a mother, whatever your roles are in life, I think we're all trying to improve. For me, curiosity led me to this, and I've been very fortunate. We met through this business. You get to meet a lot of authors, speakers, a lot of really cool, successful people from different walks of life. And I've been able to befriend a lot of authors because I'm an avid reader. I love reading, and a lot of them have told me in one way or another directly, hey, you should write a book. Have you ever thought about this? And I just kind of always brush it off. And I did this for years. I finally got to the point where I said, you know what, maybe this would be good. So I just started a daily writing practice, and it just kind of poured out. That curiosity led me to, okay, maybe I should just start writing. Once I started writing, I found that the clarity it helped provide for me about why I believe certain things, core values, and then it drew all these experiences that I've been fortunate to live, and all these stories just started coming back to my memory. And I was thinking about, wow, that's why I believe in that. The standard is the standard is one of the chapters. And Sean McVay and I, when we kind of came into LA, it was a new, fresh perspective from a team that hadn't won in a while. And we built this thing based on the standard and the culture and everything that thrives off of that. So it was boom. I remembered all these stories. And I kind of write about that, where I'm touching on some of the personal stories that I've lived through in my life, but a lot of the things that I've learned from really great leaders in my time in the NFL, but just in life. So that curiosity got me to start. And then the clarity that it provided was really cool. It was almost like self-therapy for me. And now, hearing people that tell me, man, your book really helped me. It helped me establish better routines in my life, really helped me attack this process, because the title is what? Beyond Comfort. We all are going to deal with discomfort. We talked about it earlier, losing streaks or in life, medical events, things like that. You and I share in common, having things that are life altering occur to you. That's a fact of life. Unfortunately, it's things we're going to have to respond to. Adversity comes for us. Being able to get outside your comfort zone is something we all kind of have to lean into. And that was a big driving factor of writing that book.
That's really incredible. Can people in the audience buy this book just online? Do you have a web page they can go to?
Yeah, online, easiest place is probably Amazon.com. You can Barnes & Noble online and everything, but Amazon's probably the easiest. Rath.com is the website. Yeah, anyone can get it. It's funny. My children, our oldest is reading it right now, which I didn't make her, so that completely on her own. But it was funny because I've had kids, obviously, she's 11 at the time, and then all the way up to, grandparents have said, this book is really interesting from the stories and things like that. Things that we take for granted, Doc, the lived experiences that we've been really fortunate to have. Thinking back there, it's our job, it's our responsibility to share those, because I've gotten so much knowledge from other people that are willing to write, to share, to have conversations. And I think it's on us to continue to make sure that we're doing that so everyone can hear them.
To make you feel really good, really happy that you shared your experience in your book. And what recommendations do you have for youth, high school, collegiate athletes, if you could give them, a couple pieces of advice?
Make sure, number one, orthopedically safe technique is the primary thing, especially if you're a youth and you're just now starting to train, starting to get into competitive sports. Train, great. Make sure you're using great and sound technique. And this goes for coaches and parents too. For us within the weight room or within strength and conditioning and performance, it's not about how much you lift. Make sure that you dial in every technique that you possibly can, because unfortunately, even at the NFL level, Doc, you've seen this so many times. We have players that will come in with horrible technique. And along the line, they're so genetically gifted and they're so athletically talented, where we have to take maybe the first year and actually correct faulty movement patterns, squat patterns, things like that, because they're at an increased risk of injury every time they step on the field because of these techniques. Technique number one, and if you really want to have positive outcomes, ask yourself this question: do your habits today align with your goals of tomorrow? So if you are a youth athlete and you just want to make the competitive team, the travel team, are your habits in alignment? Are you eating the right things? Are you sleeping on time? Are you going to bed? Do you have a good sleep routine? Are you doing those things that you know are going to make you into a better athlete, into a better person, and help you make that team? Same thing for high school going into college. Your habits will eventually become your outcomes. So make sure that you're establishing positive and healthy habits.
Great advice. What's the most underrated recovery habit?
Sleep. I'd have to say sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so underutilized. And once again, all the mistakes I've made in my life, I try to optimize my sleep now. And it's not easy balancing the work, balancing your home life, children, all those things, but it's something I've gotten better at. I still need to get better at, but it's something that I've felt physically a difference and I've seen impact thousands of athletes. Sleep, optimizing your sleep patterns, I think is the number one thing just for health, mental health, physical health. Everything will improve if you optimize and you actually enhance your sleep.
How about the one tech or tool that you would want to keep if everything else disappeared? If you had one thing you could keep. We talked about lots.
But the force plate is really, really crucial in some of the things that we do. There's a lot of testing protocols you can do there and a lot of great information. But I would say on-field data. So for me, the GPS or RFID system, the Zebra system that we utilize, the on-field tracking, because I would say it like this: you can watch a practice and typically your coach's eye is going to give you a pretty good indicator. But some of those subacute things, like how many high-level accelerations or decelerations a player undertakes, my human eye can't track that over the course of a 2-hour practice. So being able to have that data so that then we can make adjustments if we need to, that's so critically important. I think that would probably be the one I would keep. I like that question.
What's the best indicator, would you say, or a data point or a visual observation that you found on how ready a player is going to be to perform that day?
I would say neuromuscular fatigue. So force plate would give you some objective data, but I'll go back to asking them subjectively, because how a player feels, a lot of that is unlocked through the mind. For me, you could have a really rough week. You might be a little bit sore, but when game time rolls around, hormones start increasing, everything else, adrenaline's pumping, and talking to that player, how do you feel? And I always say this too, to my staff, to anyone that we work with within the field. We're not just performance coaches. We're not just coaches, whatever hats you wear, whatever your title is, we're confidence builders. So for me, being able to build confidence and breathe confidence into our athletes, I think that's a critical part of this job. So when you can have that subjective question, just say, hey, how do you feel? I'm feeling a little sore. All right, well, let's focus on that. And then building confidence, maybe through a dynamic warm-up that you can get some of that soreness out. Now you just unlocked a little bit different level of confidence in that player. So they're more adequate. They're more adequately prepared and ready to go train and then go into that game.
Yeah, and that confidence from an orthopedic side, from the injury, the prevention, right? So after doing an ACL reconstruction, we look at confidence levels and we look at the return to play, and we can say, okay, you have a 90% chance of returning to play from the orthopedic side, but really only 65% of players are getting back after an ACL injury, and that's a confidence. Really, if you look at their confidence level and test them, are they ready to get back? And so I think confidence plays a huge role on performance, on injury prevention, on that return to play. So it's an important factor.
Completely agree. Yes, absolutely love it.
Ted, it was incredibly inspiring, everything you said, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today to look inside the science and strategy behind elite performance in the NFL. Your ability to connect data, communication, and culture is really what stands out, and it reminds us that true performance is about people, really, and not just about numbers. So for everyone listening, whether you're a coach, a clinician, athlete, the key takeaway is success is built on trust, collaboration, and consistent attention to the smallest details. Again, Ted, thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Robin West. Join me next time as we dive deeper into the science of performance, recovery, and injury prevention. This is Blueprint of the Athlete, where science meets sport.